Engagement really thrives in a safe and inclusive space for our students. And it's a place where they have to feel like they can take academic risks. And if they're constantly in a fear of ridicule or rejection, if we don't create an environment that's one, inviting for that, celebrating that, and making sure that it's safe for that kind of engagement, it's going to be hard to engage our students at the highest levels of learning. Hey, teachers, welcome to the Lead, Serve, Teach podcast, where we explore the intersection of leadership, education, and personal growth. I'm your host, D.Paul Miller, and I'm so glad that you joined me here for, a little real talk about what's going on in our classrooms, about what we're up against, what issues there may be, but more importantly, what opportunities we can find as we move forward and become better educators together. So again, thanks for joining me here. This is the fourth episode in a mini-series that we've been doing here at the Lead, Serve, Teach podcast on engagement and how to engage learners today in our classrooms as our students are looking and searching for a place where they can find relevance, they can find purpose, a place where they can have a relationship, where they can make a difference, where they can really figure out what their next steps are in their life. And that's why it's so important as educators to realize that we're more than just educators, we're life changers. And so starting with the foundational element of building relationship, designing our lessons for active participation, getting our students involved in the heavy lift of learning, that is super important. It's part of the engagement process. And also not skipping over relevance, but in fact, tapping into relevance. It's part of what builds the purpose for our students, letting them into developing this why for the lesson. It's so important to provide those real world connections for our students as they get engaged with the learning. The last foundational element of engaging our students I want to look at today is just creating a culture where belonging and safety are kind of non-negotiables. One of the most interesting experiences I had in the classroom is actually teaching an AP level course, like a college level course to high school students. As you can imagine, this is some of the highest flyers in the school. I'm looking at some of the best and brightest, and these students are at the top of their game. They've been working hard for many years. They're getting ready for their senior year. They're getting ready for colleges and universities. It was interesting as we're going through this course, and I noticed that as long as the assignments I gave, as long as the activities I would plan had very clear and defined answers, the students are good with that. But whenever I asked them to come up with their own opinions, to share their own thoughts, I realized very quickly that a lot of those students, especially these high flying students, they were a little bit uncomfortable with that idea. They were uncomfortable with this idea that there wasn't a clear and specific answer. And in fact, they were taking a risk by just sharing an opinion that, well, in some ways couldn't be argued with, but also at the same time, maybe challenged by other students, maybe challenged by the teacher. They held themselves to a very high standard. And at the same time, they were scared to actually see failure as a moment of learning. That's what our focus is going to be today for episode 4 in this mini series on engagement, is creating a culture and a belonging and safety, a culture where risk taking is celebrated and how failure becomes, well, feedback for our students, that they see it as part of the learning process itself. Engagement really thrives in a safe and inclusive space for our students. And it's a place where they have to feel like they can take academic risks. And if they're constantly in a fear of ridicule or rejection, and if we don't address that as a classroom and make sure that other students aren't going to ridicule or reject those students who are taking those academic risks, sharing their own ideas, thoughts, and opinions, something that simple. If we don't create an environment that's one, inviting for that, celebrating that, and making sure that it's safe for that kind of engagement, it's going to be hard to engage our students at the highest levels of learning. You educators out there, you know what I'm talking about when I say levels of learning. Is it kind of like a simple identification question? Is it simple like rote memorization? Is it something on this lower level of learning? Or is it something higher level where we're asking our students to analyze something and provide an evaluation? That term evaluation really means that they have to make an opinion. They have to take a stance on something and share their own real thoughts. And it can't be right or wrong per se, but it will be challenged, and maybe their own thinking might change with the challenges that come up. We have to make sure that our space, our classrooms are open to that. One thing I found to be so useful in the classroom is the power of feedback. I felt weird whenever a student would turn in an assignment. Let's say they got a 70 on the assignment. It felt weird to me to just write a 70 on the paper, give it back to them, say, well, yeah, here you go. Got a 70 on it. You missed some things. That just felt weird. It didn't feel good enough, but I needed to tell them several things. One would be what they missed. I had to sit there and say, you know what, you missed X, you missed Y, and you missed Z. And then there was a step further with that feedback that I would give the student. I would then say, hey, I want you to go back and review this lesson or review this material here. And I want you to resubmit this assignment after you've made the fixes, after you've changed that. Whenever I started doing that kind of feedback, life changed. It was amazing what happened for my students in that classroom. And I started providing that level of feedback to the students. It told my students that, well, failure was okay. Failure, not getting a perfect grade was okay. And it was amazing how the feedback I put on assignments actually transferred into the day-to-day classroom and the instruction that was happening and the students' willingness to engage by taking academic risk, by sharing their own thoughts and ideas in that classroom. This culture was being created in my classroom where failure was just part of it. Failure was okay. They might get a 50 on an assignment. It's an F, but they're going to know exactly what they missed, what they didn't get right, and how they can fix it, how they can become better because of that failure. So much of the research on educational psychology talks about the importance of safety and belonging, and how that activates the brain for learning. Take that the other way, without safety, without this sense of belonging in a classroom, the brain, I think, is going to default to like a survival mode where they're going to block off deeper learning. They're just trying to get through the day. They're just trying to get through your class. And they're not going to engage completely. They're going to be reserved. They're going to be guarded. They're going to be like, hey, I'm going to survive. And surviving means I've got to get a good grade in here and hopefully move forward. It's not about learning for them. It's about meeting a mark. It's about meeting a certain grade, or maybe not even a grade. Maybe it's just get through with a passing grade for your class, whatever it may be. Well, that's not good enough. We as educators, we should create the culture in each and every one of our classrooms that welcomes the students in, that makes sure that they belong with the relationship, and make sure that they understand it's safe to take risks and to share their own ideas. It's safe for them to say, I'm going to take a different perspective on something. Here are my reasons why. And I welcome the challenges to my reasoning. I welcome for other students or maybe even the teacher to get engaged and say, you know what, let's talk about this. Let's have a debate. Let's share our own ideas. It's amazing how that type of class where such high level thinking happens, analysis and evaluation level thinking happens in that class can actually be supported by something as simple as teacher feedback on an assignment and how we push them to redo the assignment, resubmit the assignment, and we as teachers can regrade that assignment. So that's my practical application. What can you as a teacher do to create a culture of belonging, of safety, where risk taking in an educational sense is a celebrated thing in your classroom, where students are so engaged with the learning that they're willing to share their opinions, their thoughts, their ideas, and welcome the challenges? The practical application for today for all my educators out there is to provide a different level of feedback that's less than that A level work. I think it's important for us as educators to make a commitment today to always provide feedback to our students. Write it on the sheet of paper, write it on a sticky note, type it in the student comment box, whatever it may be, whatever level of education you're in. I want to encourage you to make sure that you are providing feedback that, one, tells them what they missed, tells them a bit of real world connection, that why it's important, that relevance, and then also help them focus on where they can learn, relearn, redo, remaster that information, and then be willing to accept the redo, the resubmitted work for those students and give them the grade that they deserve now. Keep in mind, when students feel safe, they take the kind of risks that lead to growth. This week, try to give feedback to your students, whether it's verbal, whether it's written. Try to give them feedback that's going to give them this gift of fearless learning. It's so exciting what happens when your students start their academic risk taking that you want them to take in the classroom. Give them that feedback that's going to push them towards doing that. I promise you, you would love the results. Remember, you're not just a teacher, you're a leader, you're a change maker. So keep striving, keep inspiring, don't ever quit. I'm D.Paul Miller. Thanks for joining me here. I'll see you here for the next episode.